Hello and welcome to another episode of the Richmond BigFooty Tigercast. We've got our regular guests back in this week, Grockadoc and TheLoungeLizard. Gee, that was a tongue twister. Welcome back, boys.
Thanks for having me again.
Thanks, Michaels. Thanks for having me back.
No worries at all. And as what typically happens with the episodes that we do, we usually talk for about 10 minutes beforehand and then think, we may as well just kick off the show talking about what we were just discussing because it was pretty good content. So we'll carry on with the discussion. It was basically surrounding the Tom Lynch factor. As you can imagine, Richmond supporters are getting excited by the prospect of Tom Lynch signing. So we were naturally talking about that with the photo that obviously come out the other day of Lynch arriving at Melbourne Airport and Neil Baum at the same time, and whether it's just a cruel coincidence or there's something more to it, who knows. But from all reports from various people with various sources, including Grockadoc and Tiger71, that it sounds like from all reports that it's as much of a done deal as can be done without breaking the rules at this time of the year. Is that pretty much a fair summation of where it's at, Groc?
Yeah, from what I understand personally, talking to a few people with connections at the club, basically what I've been told is that it's pretty much a 95% done deal that Lynch will be a Tiger in 2019. Obviously, he can't actually come out and say where he's going yet because of the whole regulations with the AFL on contracted and uncontracted players. But I know the club is still waiting on the surgery, see how that progresses to see whether or not they'll decide to pursue Lynch, which I think is probably a safe option given we've been sort of burnt by injured players with Yaron and Chris Knights and everything over the past sort of decade. So I think the club right now are just waiting to hear back about the results from his surgery sometime this week, I believe it is. And but yeah, from what I understand, it's pretty much a verbal agreement from both sides that Lynch will be in yellow and black next season.
You were mentioning that, like, him not being able to come out and say it now. I mean, I don't follow the NRL overly close. I'm not sure if either of you guys do, but I know that in the NRL, players come out early on in the season and say, "Oh, look, this is going to be my last year at the club. I'm moving over to so and so," and they keep playing out the year. Is that somewhere where we should look to be getting to, or do we prefer it to be the way we have it, where it stays in house until the right time?
Personally, for me, I think it's probably better for clubs to know up front. I mean, you have a look at all the chaos that it's thrown Gold Coast into this whole season, where it's like, will he, won't he, will he stay, will he go? And they're in a developmental phase right now. They're in a rebuild mode. And if Lynch had come out at the start of the season and said, I'm leaving at the end of this season, no matter where we finish, that could have given Gold Coast a chance to actually throw 22 games at an up-and-coming key forward to replace Lynch in the future, because right now with the games Lynch was playing, like, yes, he's probably their best or second best player, but at the same time, if he's not going to be there for their future, they really should be looking to invest games in players who want to be there and will take them forward. And Lynch right now, from what I understand, isn't that, and it's probably a blessing in disguise for Gold Coast that he did get injured, because now they can actually start looking at the players on their list to fill that role if and when Lynch does leave. So I think it's probably better for club and player if they can actually announce early in the season that they're leaving. It's also less of a distraction for the clubs as well, especially if they're in finals contention. I mean, we saw what the Dustin Martin circus was like last season. So I think I think it's probably best for everyone involved if it gets announced earlier rather than later.
Speaking of the Dusty Martin one, say last year it gets to round 16, 17, we're sitting top 4, and he comes out and says, look, I am actually going to take up an offer elsewhere. Would you have wanted him to have been kept in the side given the form he was in?
I personally would. I mean, I think the biggest difference with Dusty is, I mean, you have a look, Dusty stuck around early on when he was getting money thrown at him from GWS in 2012, 2013. And then obviously he did have that little period where he decided to go look, which from what has been reported that was more Ralph Carr pushing Dusty to search for the other offers rather than Dusty saying that he was going to do it himself. So I think if Dusty had left last year to North for the 1.4 million or whatever it was, I don't think we could have been too upset with Dusty leaving. I mean, we know how short a footballer's career is and how it can be taken away in an instant if you get a pretty bad injury. I mean, we've seen, Michael Close and everything from Brisbane get severely injured, and that's been the end of his career. So I personally wouldn't have begrudged Dusty if he left for that kind of money, obviously setting himself up for life after football, because who knows what's going to happen. But at the same time, a part of me would have been upset and angry that he decided to leave. But then at the same time, if he did decide to leave and say at round 16, I'm leaving, take the money, I probably would have played him, but I probably wouldn't have played him in the positions that he was better at, like that inside mid. I probably would have played him as a permanent forward at that stage and brought in a midfielder, probably Jack Graham, earlier than what we brought him in last season, just to see if he could develop into that sort of big inside midfield role.
And Lambs, what's your take on the Lynch situation? Is he going to be a good fit if it does come across that he comes over?
It's a really interesting topic. I certainly want us to pursue him and sign him for the obvious reason of we're in a window and we know how fleeting it's been for Richmond supporters to be in a window. I certainly know, I didn't see the glory years of the 70s and 80s and, those brief appearances in prelims in, I think, was it 95 and 2001, were a bit before my time, age-wise as well. So we're in the window and we've only got one key forward and he's getting on and he plays his best football up the ground. So to have someone of Lynch's calibre come in, I think is a no-brainer. The money factor, I'm not too worried about. You got to pay to get quality. And it's been quite clear throughout this negotiation period that money is not the be-all and end-all for him. I think there's been reports that he would even sign for sort of $800,000 to be in part of a flag. And we're seeing guys like Dangerfield sign for unders, because it's not the most important thing to him. He's made his money at the Gold Coast. And I think the impression has been that he's made his money. He actually does want to come and play in some successful sides, and the Gold Coast aren't going to be near it in his time. So money's not going to be an issue. Having him there is going to be massive. The concern is going to be is a fallout of some other players in terms of who we might lose. There's been some reports of guys like Townsend being pushed out, and obviously Townsend's a role player who bobbed up at the right time. So there's a bit of, there's a bit of a thing for Townsend to keep him around the club. I certainly love seeing him get back in the side for that reason. But there's a slight concern about who we're going to lose. I mean, obviously, when you look at the list, Griggs are 30 or going on 30, and likewise with Hauling, he starts to sort of break down with a couple of older man injuries of recent. And, of course, Jack's, I think, 29, will be turning 30 next year. So there's a natural turnover in the list. We've already lost Hampson and Griffiths this year. And, of course, after this year, Yaron and Delidio's money comes off the books. And, there's talk about Shai Bolton looking around. And Corey Ellis, I believe, has been linked with Hawthorn. So whether we lose players in the natural progression he can fit in, then I think it's going to be great. But I think there's a little part of me that's, I wouldn't want to lose too many people. But then the Hawthorn model, they successfully brought guys in during their window while turning over players, and it clearly didn't stop them. So for mine, I want him there. I think we can afford him. I think we've got the right natural player turnover to get him. But I think we need to be careful that we don't go and lose someone like a Townsend who's just a great clubman, and great guy to have around the club. And as it's been mentioned, I think it's all but a done deal. I think it's all been all but a done deal for quite some time. Frankly, the one that surprises me more is the talk of Stephen May wanting out. that's taken me by surprise.
Speaking of
that's
all the talk, Tiger71 just inboxed me back saying that he hasn't heard anything else about the footage with Balm, but nothing other than everyone thinks that he's ours. So, as I said, his stance hasn't changed since August.
And it's interesting on that Balm thing. I mean, I haven't seen the picture, but Balm's too good a mover to be coincidentally running into Tom Lynch at the airport. I think it's been very cleverly done by Balm. To do it in a place where he's got a very good alibi about how they were together. But then there's been reports as well. I mean, I've heard from one person saying that Lynch was down in Sorrento supposedly having lunch with Eddie Maguire. And then there's tweets coming out that Prestier's dad has been quite vocal about the fact that he's signed and sealed. So I think there's so much media report that goes on at this point, but I tend to agree. I think he's ours. And I think it would have been well factored in. And, it goes to show the change in the club, that a guy like Tom Lynch wants to come. It's been, I can't think of outside of maybe Nathan Brown, the last big coup we pulled from another club. So it's fantastic to see the club as a destination place for players. We were not so, we laugh a bit at North, struggling to get guys, but it was not that long ago that we couldn't get anyone to save our lives.
Position, yeah.
To a degree, I mean, the Yaron trade was almost, we have to be seen to be getting someone.
Pretty much, yeah. But you're right. It wasn't that long ago that we were in their position, so it is nice that the tables have turned. But hopefully, there's obviously more to play out, and I'm sure we'll discuss it on future episodes as more and more stuff comes to light. But it's one of those where there's smoke, there's fire kind of things, I think, with Tom Lynch. But we'll see how it goes.
Just on the Lynch thing, I think even Collingwood has sort of resigned to the fact that they're not going to get Lynch now, because from what I've been reading and hearing, they're actually stepping up their interest in Stephen May. So it almost seems that they've put the idea of getting Lynch on the back burner and started focusing more on Stephen May. So whether that's them acknowledging that Lynch has all but agreed to us, or they decided that Stephen May probably fits their side better, because we know that Collingwood's key defenders are sort of getting on. Lyndon Dunn's close to 30s, got injuries, stuff like that. Their defence is probably their weakest area in the field. So I'm not sure if them targeting Stephen May ahead of Tom Lynch is for list reasons, or just they're resigned to the fact that they're not going to get Lynch. But I think the biggest thing for us, the player that I wouldn't want to lose to get Lynch, is Jaden Short. I think especially with, as LoungeLizard mentioned, with Basher Hooley getting on and he's getting these constant injuries now, Jaden Short becomes even more critical to us as that attacking halfback flanker. So I think if we get Tom Lynch, that's going to improve us in the forward line. But if we lose Jaden Short, it's going to make a huge dent into how we transition the ball from back 50, and that's where we do like to launch from. So I think it's sort of it's one of those things. It's kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul if we lose Short to get Lynch.
I don't know what Tiger71 has heard in regards to Short, and I certainly have no mail, but I mean, I've not heard anything that he's looking to move or is unhappy with his spot at the club. I think it's one of these
just the dollar
situations.
Offer on the contract.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it objectively, I mean, this is maybe his second breakout season. I mean, he was entrenched in the side last season before he came on, and
got the injury.
You won't want to get. Yeah, you don't want to sort of get too carried away with your place. I mean, we've seen it a bit with Bolton in recent times, and other players at other clubs as well. I hope that he's sort of not asking for too much and getting too carried away. I wouldn't be surprised to see a 2-year deal potentially. Didn't relook at it, if he can snare a flag or something. But I mean, as a observer's view, I'm very confident of keeping Short.
So I think Short's taken
the
a
one
leaf
on-
out of Dusty's book from last year and backed himself to have a good season, postpone it, and then sort of get more money at the end of the season than if he had signed sort of 3 or 4 weeks into the season. So I think he's probably playing it smart on his end as well.
And no doubt, we probably know, if Lynch is 95% to us, we probably know what he's going to ask and what he's going to be signed for. So I think when they're doing these negotiations with the other players, they know full well what Lynch will sign for and what they've got to play with. I don't think it's one of these situations where we have to wait and see what Lynch wants.
Yeah.
I think the club will well and truly know where that's at. The one I am interested in is Grigg, whether he goes on, whether he goes to another club. I mean, it's been quite evident that he's been slowing up a touch this year. I think Grigg always has been a slow player and had seasons where it's taken him a while to get going. Even last year, he played a role. I think you may have actually said it, Grock, in the thread somewhere, that he played a role very cleverly where the opposition ruckman were treating him as a second ruckman, where now that they're just seeing him as a guy who's competing with them, so they're playing him differently. And I think that's affected his form to a degree, that clubs are not taking him as seriously because they know what he's there to do. But he is getting on. He does want to play on from all reports, a bit like Hooley. And I heard there was someone on the radio that mentioned that Hooley would go to another club to play on. I don't think that's true. I think he'll stay. I think Hooley will stay at Richmond either way. But I think Grigg will be the interesting one, whether he potentially tests the waters and, of course, follows his great mate in Lids to GWS, particularly, if they lose a few more players this off-season themselves. But then there was interesting talk from Tiger Imposter. Said he was speaking with someone at Coburg, and that Brandon Ellis is the word is that he's likely to go north. I don't think he'll be involved in a trade with Lynch, but it'd be interesting to see if he's, I don't think his spot in the side's guaranteed, or his future at Richmond is guaranteed. I think he's quite a good footballer, but I don't get the impression that he's an entrenched Richmond in the Richmond side. I think he's someone we could throw around for currency, maybe for picks to try and pick back into this supposed super draft. So for mine, I think the only two ones who might look like moving on could be Grigg and Ellis.
With the Grigg one, I was tagged in a video on Twitter that he was in an interview recently and pretty much straight out said that there's no contract offer in place at the moment. So he's not heard anything apparently from the club one way or another. So it probably has a bit of legs on it that he might be one that might sort of be a bit unlucky in missing out potentially.
But I think he'll be a great guy to get for a mid-range side. Come in, play for a year or two. He's experienced. He's a hard trainer. Even potentially go and do a bit of a Luke Hodge style thing where you go up for, or Sam Mitchell approach of go and play for a year or two, even as back at somewhere like Carlton. Hard training, enforcing into the kids and then going to coaching, because I believe that coaching is something he's interested in. Yeah. Where that's not a matter for Hooley. Hooley said to me personally, I think when we met them at the training day last year, that coaching is absolutely not something he's interested in. He spent a game when he was suspended in the box and said not for him. Yeah. And his future lies purely in work with the Muslim community and getting young Muslim lads and women involved in junior football, and I think we're very big supporting into that. So I don't think he'll be tempted by a coaching contract where I think Grigg could be.
Yeah, there's one thing you actually touched on there, Lounge Lizard, before you started talking about Grigg, when you were mentioning Brandon Ellis being possibly a part of a trade for Lynch up north. I personally don't think that Gold Coast will match Tom Lynch's offer as a free agent, only on the simple fact that right now they're currently sitting 17th on the ladder, which gives them pick 2. And if they don't match, they get pick 3 as well. And I think to them, pick 3 right now is probably more important than getting a player and a late first round pick. If I was Gold Coast, I probably wouldn't match and then take with pick 2 and pick 3. Probably take both King boys in the draft, because being brothers, they can draft that. They're both big key position lads, so it sort of covers the Lynch loss in a couple of years' time. But it's also the fact that if you draft both together, they're going to have that support network up north, and there's going to be less sort of temptation for them to move back home for homesickness reasons because they've also got family up there. So I think from a list management point of view, I think that's probably a smarter decision long term for Gold Coast rather than matching the offer and forcing a trade.
And I think there's no doubt that they'll get a round one compensation, even if we offer them 800,000. I mean, we all know that the compensation formulas are complete bollocks that they make up on depending on who's going where. And I think the Gold Coast will get a first round compensation pick, even if we offered him 400,000 a year. And I agree. I think it wouldn't surprise me if Ellis went potentially somewhere to like a Brisbane. I think he'd fit in very well in that Brisbane side. And obviously, if there's a boy in the draft somewhere who is said that he won't go to Brisbane, that they may use that pick more wisely for someone like an Ellis.
All very good points there, fellas. All right, we'll push on to the dreaded review of the round 17 game versus GWS, although we could just push it aside and keep talking trade stuff for another 20 minutes potentially. No, we'll talk about the game quickly. So Richmond 10-17-77 lost to GWS 11-13-79 by 2 points. I was on record as posting that this was one of the most frustrating losses that I've seen. And I don't know, it just really angered me just because I felt we should have won. Our goal kicking was horrendous. You don't want to point the finger at sort of individuals, but Castagna kicking 0-5 and one out in the full, and Bolton not even registering a score from 40 to 45 metres out in the dying moments. Just moments like that absolutely killed us. What did you boys make of the game?
Personally, I didn't see the game, and it sounds like a bullet there. I suppose it takes us back to the old Richmond. There's as much of I think it's dead. There's still a part of that Richmond that comes back out of nowhere and reminds us, maybe endearingly, of where we've been and how far we've come. But I didn't see the game, but the reports I've read on it were not flattering. And obviously, Castagna kicking 0-5. Sometimes you have games like that, but it's disappointing for a forward who, marking, and he can be quite fumbly, can be a negative, but he's always been accurate in front of the scoreboard and very good at getting on to the goals. Bolton, I'm not so surprised about. I think I mentioned this before, I can't work out where I sit with him, whether I think he's going to be an absolute elite X-factor genius or delisted and playing waffle football in 2 years. Games like this don't help him with the situation with the contract. They don't help him coming into the side. Obviously, when Rioli was out, he wasn't first pick. So it's not great for him that after all this time out that he didn't step up. And again, I suppose for the interstate situation, I don't read into it as much as everyone else wants to. I suppose it sells the papers to a degree. But, we only went down by 2 points. I think Croc again may have mentioned on the board somewhere recently that, we're outplayed by Adelaide, and we could have pinched that. And we're comprehensively outplayed by West Coast, but we threw the game away against Port. And by the sounds of it, we threw this game away and to only go down by 2 points. One scrum to kick forward could have been the difference. We could have won, and suddenly, it's not an issue anymore. It doesn't read well. I don't think it's going to get into the players' heads because of this, and I don't fear going into state for a final. But it's not good to have a loss like that. But we won a lot in a row, and I'm a believer in having losses at the right time. And this could just be a good reminder to the boys of the fundamentals of the game plan, the fundamentals of being a Richmond man, and how we got there last year. And it's not going to be a walk in the park. And I think if you're going to take any positives out of it, that it may just be one of those losses we needed to have. And obviously, come back, regroup. We got the Saints this week. I think this is the game to break the record at the MCG. So we can get a game back on track. We're still top of the table. We should have a very good win this week. And from our obviously not seen the game. As I said, my views on it were hopefully it's just a loss we need to have, but not good either way, but not as drastic as I thought it was when I first jumped on the autopsy thread. For those who are listening, you would have thought it was the Wallace days for a while there. But at risk of repeating myself a third time, I don't think it's the end of the world.
And Grok, what about yourself? Did you catch the game? What did you make of it all?
I watched the game. I watched the whole thing. Even though I was tempted for the first time ever to turn the actual game off, probably 4 or 5 times throughout the course of the night. It's one of those ones where I think we all feel bad and think we let a win slip through our fingers. But at the same time, I personally think that if we had have won that game, we would have stolen it. I don't think we deserve to win at any stage Saturday night. I think GWS thoroughly outplayed us for probably 2/3 of the match. I think it was mainly that burst in the second quarter and that burst during the last quarter that even had us in a remote chance of winning the game anyway. It was just outside of that goal, GWS just thoroughly outplayed us. But like we look at, oh, sorry about that. We look at Jason Castagna kicking 0-5 and 1 or 2 out on the full. At the time, I was livid that he missed those shots, especially that one after the high tackle in that last quarter where he's 25 out pretty much directly in front and missed. But at the same time, you also have to look at it. He had 6 or 7 shots at goal. So he's getting into the positions where he's having shots to score. And it's one of those things. He was probably our most dangerous forward on Saturday night. He was just constantly in the right position, just couldn't execute. So I think as bad as Castagna's kicking was last Saturday, I think at the same time we do need him in the side. He just offers us so much with his gut running and just finding space in the forward line. I think he's probably one of the best players we have at just being able to get into a position where he can actually have a shot at goal. But
also,
it's just
once you kick 0-2 as well, on that point, once you kick 0-2, it gets into your head. I'm not surprised in that with 0-5. It's very hard to when you're having if he just purely had an off day, you can't flip that switch during a game.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing too. I think we all know George is a better shot at goal when he's running. So I'm surprised that there were a few times he decided to go back with the drop hunt from his set shots. Obviously, when he does that, they do generally tend to go all over the place. He's usually a lot better when he can curl the ball around his body, either from a snap or a banana. So I think on that, and I think they even mentioned it in the broadcast on Saturday night with that one where he went back from 25 and missed that. From those, he would normally go back and sort of turn 90 degrees away from the goal and then kick over his shoulder and put it through. And I think that just sort of summed up George's night, where he was so far in his head that he forget what sort of got him a position in the side. Obviously, Bolton had a quiet game. I don't think the role that he played Saturday night really suits him, especially when you look at the role he was playing in the VFL when he was tearing it up. He was playing more through the midfield and out on the wings rather than as a small forward. And I really don't think a small forward role sort of suits Shy at AFL level. He's very creative, very quick, got great vision, he's pretty elusive, and I think those traits are wasted away where he's playing as a small forward marking target. I think he's better off pushing up the ground and sort of using his awareness and speed running towards goal rather than away from it on a lead to the midfield. So I think they misused Bolton badly on Saturday night. I also think Higgins had a quiet game. Obviously, he's been pretty good the last couple of weeks, but I think it's just all that extra midfield time starting to catch up on him. And I think he's due for a spell pretty soon. But in terms of players that played well, I thought Brandon Ellis had his best game for the year. Obviously, he had the 30 possessions and 7 marks. Was just really solid, pushing up on the wing. Dustin Martin's hitting some form. Obviously, he had the 29 and kicked 1. But I think the biggest thing for us is people saying that we don't have injuries. You know, it's one of those things where it's no coincidence. Yeah. It's no coincidence that Dustin Martin's played his best couple of games this year when we've gotten Dion Prestia back, because it's allowed him to be a lot more free. You know, he doesn't have to play as Lambert. They're getting so much better now that we've got Prestia back, because Prestia, for me, is one of our most important players structure-wise. It just allows the other players to play a lot more free and everything. And obviously, Rioli coming back in the forward line, that's allowing players like Butler, even though he's injured, Castagna as well, it's allowing them to sort of push up the ground and focus on their attacking game a lot more than their defensive game, because Rioli is statistically our best defensive forward in terms of pressure acts and everything. And of course, we've also got Jack Graham missing. He's actually rated number 2 in the AFL for overall pressure acts. So I think that makes a huge difference as well, especially through the midfield, where we have a look on Saturday night where we just got completely outplayed through the midfielder. It just makes you wonder where, if we had Jack Graham, would Lockie Whitfield have had the 35 possessions? Would Cornelio have had the 30 possessions and kicked a goal? Would Taranto have had 23 and kicked 2 goals? It's just the pressure that Graham brings just makes everyone a lot better. And it's people when they say Richmond don't have injuries, we don't have injuries to the extent that other clubs have in terms of the players that are supremely classy. I mean, you have a look at Collingwood with Treloar and Jamie Elliott and players like that. They're all really, really good players. But the thing is, we get injuries, and they're only 1 or 2 week injuries for the most part, but it just happens to be the players that are integral to our structure, obviously with Graham and Broad. And Butler and stuff. They're just really, they're all part of one big machine, and as soon as you lose 2 or 3 pieces out of any machine, it's going to sputter. It's going to, it's just not going to work as well as it should. And I think that's the biggest thing when people say we don't have injuries. It's not we don't have injuries, it's we don't have the long-term injuries. But the injuries we do get are to players that are integral to our game plan.
And on top of that, I mean, Caddy would have been playing sore. Hooley was straight back in after 4 weeks out. As you said, Broad, Butler, and Graham missing. It's been a bit of a makeshift side in the last few weeks, and I'm hoping that they all come back, together, but at the right time like they did last year. But we've had, as you said, a lot of key people miss certain things, and we're playing a bit sore at the moment, and I wouldn't be surprised if we, maybe Caddy has a rest soon leading to the finals. Maybe someone like a Stengel gets in, who I can't seem to think what more he can do. And of course, maybe give someone a run in to give Nank a rest for the same reason. So I absolutely agree. I mean, the fair thing we don't have injuries is just absurd. As you said, we don't have the class injuries. When we touch wood, Cochin hasn't gone down, and Dusty was sort of playing sore but not totally injured, and you lose 2 or 3 guys out of a game style of ours. They're very hard to replace, and I think a lot of these guys are extremely underrated. I mean, Grimes is almost becoming so underrated. He's overrated. He's kind of getting towards Cyril territory at the moment. But he's underrated. I mean, Broad, I think, even by some of our own guys, don't really take in what he brings to the club and what he brings to the game. I've been a big fan of him for a long time. he's massive. I mean, Butler's massive in the forward line. Rioli was just huge to the way it functioned. And Caddy, I mean, you take Caddy out of that forward line, and Dusty becomes less potent. You take Prestia out, and he becomes even less potent. So it's the key guys who come in, and like as you said, Lambert's just beautifully worked his way back in form since Prestia's come back inside, and I'm a bit surprised at how integral he is and what a difference he makes to the overall balance of the side. So I think the idea we have for injuries is a bit odd, but I agree completely. And touch wood that these guys start to fall back in. As you said, they're 1 to 2 week injuries, which I think's the fortunate thing. And as we said before, that's entirely on the fitness staff. They probably don't get the credits they deserve for keeping. Yeah. I think you would agree. I think the only real long-term injuries were Hampson. His was degenerative. Marek, who just hit old age as a footballer, and Drummond.
And Rioli at the start of the season, yeah.
With the broken foot, and Drummond, who's done 2 ACLs, and I think one of them was his debut, and the other one was his second game back from it. So,
yeah,
that's not luck. That's precise training regime.
Yeah, spot on. It's
just good player management. Yeah, it's just great player management. And I think that all comes back down to sort of the honesty sessions at the club. Players now aren't, afraid to speak up and say, I'm not feeling good this week. I'm sore here. This isn't working for me. Stuff like that. And I think the club's pretty good at, just if a player isn't 100%, just giving them that little week off, give them a chance to sort of, get it 100% right, rather than, roll the dice, take the risk, and hope that, it doesn't get exacerbated or they don't do any further damage. And I think that's a mantra that we've taken, especially over the last couple of years, where we don't take the risks of players. I mean, we saw...
All right, so just so everyone can catch up, my headset died, so whatever they were talking about prior, I've got no idea. So I think they were talking about the last little bit of the injuries that we've had and how it affects the team. So where did you guys get up to with that bit before I cut out?
Just speaking about Hawley and the honesty towards the members about where he's at and that selflessness about injuries and how that's coming through the whole club. And as Grok was saying, we would have rushed guys back a few years ago, but now... we learnt those mistakes, and I think there's probably a mantra of give them, an extra week could be an extra 5 years on their career. I think you probably see that with Delidio now.
Yeah, it's he played a game in the NEFL the other week, so he's getting back on track. But yeah, I think you're right. The honesty that our guys have had to put their hand up, even Asprey when he hurt his foot against Port. I think he got to late during that week, and he said to the club, "Look, I'm not right to go," and pulled out of the game for that weekend. So, whereas you find a lot of other players from other clubs we'll call it a selfish thing, but they'll put their hand up and try and get themselves out in the park, and it can actually hurt you more than benefit you.
Exactly.
Absolutely, and as when I was playing football, I was certainly wanted to play through injuries to play, and towards the end of the seasons leading to the finals, I mean, I was that banged up, I was barely training, and would suffer for it. So I know what it's like to be playing through the injuries, and you're fine, then your body gives out, and that was local football. So I can only imagine how they'll be feeling it at the top flight.
Absolutely. All right, we'll push on to our game this week. We're playing on Friday night, round 18 versus St Kilda.
Wait, you mean it's not Carlton?
No, unfortunately not. It'd be nice to play them twice with the way they're going at the moment. But the Saints have hit a little bit of form. I think they've won 3 of their last 4, I think it is. Starting to play the way they want to be playing, which is good for them, obviously. And they obviously touched us up last year in a similar round. So it'll be interesting to see how we go up against them this time. What are you guys thinking about this game? Is it something that we should not pencil in, but we should all feel pretty confident that
put your house on it.
We should be able to be good enough to win this game, bouncing back from a loss, shouldn't we?
Put your house on it, gamble responsibly, put the lot on. I think we got this one wrapped up nicely. I think the Aints may not even bother rolling in because it'd only be disappointing. And unfortunately for their fans, we can't discount this game for you. But I think, in all seriousness, I think it's be a very comfortable win for us. Obviously, it's at the MCG, I think, is it?
No, Etihad.
Etihad.
Well, I still think we'll win very comfortably there. I think the Saints have had good form, but I mean, the size they've played, outside of a very nice win against Melbourne, have not been overly impressive. I think we've, we're not the sort of team to drop to a game to St Kilda. I mean, we did it last year, I know, but I don't think we'll do it again. And I think we'll win this one quite comfortably. I think St Kilda will make a good fist of it, but I think we do our usual trait of blowing the second half out the water.
Is that similar thoughts for yourself, Grock?
Yeah, I'm a little nervous on this game. I think these are the sort of type of games that are really dangerous games for us, because St Kilda are fighting for their season. I mean, they can still technically make finals if.
Where's Pasquale when you need him?
Yeah,
if they
are, they can still sort of make finals. There's still a mathematic possibility, so they're going to come out, no doubt, and that they've actually been in some decent form, as you said, over the last month. So it's one of those ones where I'm a little bit wary of what they could do, sort of like I was last year with this game. It's one of those things, especially at Etihad, it's a variable for us, whereas St Kilda know how to play that ground. It's obviously their home ground, so it's one of those things where I would expect us to have a comfortable win, but at the same time, football these days, that it's just getting a lot more even, the competitions, and any side can beat any other side on their day, except maybe Carlton. They're not going to beat anyone soon because they can't play themselves. So I think as on their day, any side can knock over anyone, and we've seen quite a few upsets this year. So as I said, I'd probably expect a comfortable win on Friday night, but at the same time, it wouldn't be the end of the world if we lose. Although I do expect us to win. Obviously, we need to win to keep the top two, the gap between the top two with us and West Coast, and keep Collingwood and Port Adelaide at bay. But we do have a pretty decent run home with games at the MCG as well. So it's just one of those things. I do expect a good win, but yeah.
I mean, their midfield's sort of come back into a bit of form with Steele, Stevens, and Billings come back in. He's got 30-plus disposals.
Armitage has hit some form. I think he had 30 and kicked 4. Was it last week or the week before?
Yeah, I think it was the week before.
So he's finding form as well.
The first time we played them, he was getting smashed from pillar to post by St Kilda people that he was slow and needed to be delisted and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, he started to come into some form as well. So.
And then of course, you've got the live wire Jade Gresham up forward, who's been some red hot form.
Every game he smashes us, it's unbelievable.
Well, the weirdest thing is when we played Merlin in the year is how he kicked 6, but St Kilda were barely sighted. I mean, and it felt like he kicked 6 out of nowhere. So do you think Grimes goes to him? Or
I do, yeah. Grimes for me.
Yeah, I reckon Grimes as well.
But I think Gresham just scares me because when he kicked 6 on us earlier in the season, he wasn't in anywhere near the form he was in coming into this game, and it's like, if he's got his tail up now and he looks back and says, I kicked 6 against this mob last time, it's just one of those things where he's going to be full of confidence, and whether or not he can actually put that into effect is a different story, but I think he's probably the biggest danger for us on Friday night.
And what about changes for our side? I mean, there's been people calling for Corey Ellis to be dropped. I know he didn't shoot the lights out, but he was our second highest rated pressure player, and we know that Dimmer rates that stat pretty highly. Bolton obviously wasn't, the best he could have been, especially when you got Stengel and the VFL who kicked 6 goals. Are there any possible changes from our end, or do we go in unchanged and back the guys in for another week?
Personally, I think unless anyone is coming back from injury, I think we leave him. I mean, as I said, I think Stengel's probably been very unlucky not to get a go, and I wouldn't mind seeing him come in for Bolton. But that's a personal change, a personal preference change more than anything. And I think probably leave it as is. And, maybe someone like Bolton just needs a couple of weeks to get a feel for it. But I think probably leave it as is.
I've got 3 changes for the side for Friday night. I've got Bolton out for Stengel. I've
Beautiful.
got Corey Ellis out for Connor Menaduke. He's actually been in some pretty decent form in the VFL, and I think he probably offers us more at AFL level than what Corey Ellis does at this stage. And I've actually got Jack Higgins out, and I've got a man crush on this lad, and I really want to see him debut, but I've got Jack Higgins out for Liam Baker. I think Liam Baker would... Liam Baker's actually been in some pretty decent form at VFL level, and he's just one of these players. He's really smart with the ball. He's quick. He's nippy. He goes hard when he needs to. He's hard at the ball, hard at the man. I think Friday night would probably be a good game to ease him into it, because St Kilda's midfield's slow and aging, and I think it's one of those games where he'd be able to utilise his assets, where his pace and his skills. So, and I think Jack Higgins is probably due for a rest anyway. So I wouldn't mind bringing Baker in as well. So they're probably my 3 changes for the game.
The only other
I was going to jump in, boys.
Was, go on.
I was going to jump in and say I'm just going to have to jump off, but thank you very much for having me on again, and everyone that's listening and will listen. Thank you for hearing my dulcet tones for another week.
No worries, thanks for coming on.
I'll see you guys around very soon.
What's your tip for the game?
Tigers by... I'm going to do a shazza here. Tigers by 1 million.
By 1 million? Okay, no worries.
Cheers, guys. Go Tigers.
See you, mate. Yeah,
what was your change for the game?
The only other change I'd written down was Castagna to change his boots to some goal-kicking boots would be preferable. But,
yes, Castagna to get Jacob Townsend's right foot.
Yeah, that
handy. Would be.
But like you said, Baker's been in some pretty good form in the VFL, and from all reports, if you go by Dimmer's press conferences, he was pretty close last week. So maybe it is time to bring him in, and Higgins I suppose could do with a bit of a rest. But yeah, it's be interesting to see what they go with. But I still would love to see Stengel come in at some stage. I think his form in the VFL has been pretty exceptional. I
mean, he had 6 on the weekend, so I think that's a pretty hard sort of number to ignore on the weekend, especially on a sort of rainy sort of day where it was, very blustery and the conditions weren't all that great. So I think that for Stengel to kick 6 in those conditions, I think that warrants a game, especially given how good he's been over the past 4 or 5 weeks as well. And Bolton didn't exactly set, the world on fire. And I think it's one of those positions where you need to perform each week, or otherwise, we've got players in the VFL who are performing week in, week out. And obviously Bolton didn't have a great match, and he got the nod ahead of Stengel this week. So I think Stengel probably should get the nod ahead of Bolton this week.
Yeah, definitely agree. Well, it'll be interesting to see what the selectors come up with. So, just a reminder, the game is on this Friday night, Etihad Stadium at 7:50 p.m, and we're live on Channel 7 and Foxtel from 7:30. Grockadoc, thanks so much for coming on, mate, and obviously the Loungelizard, thank you for his time as well.
Just my tip.
Oh, your tip, yeah.
Yeah, Richmond by 51, I reckon.
Yeah, I reckon
it'd probably be clinical, yeah.
I reckon we'll win by anywhere between 30 to 35 would be nice, but just getting the 4 points and creating that gap like you spoke about earlier on with the top 4 would be the main priority, really.
Yeah, just maintaining that sort of game buffer. Obviously, if we get the win this week, we'll be a game clear of Collingwood, and then we've got Collingwood the week after. So that becomes a game where we could either be sort of equal with Collingwood or we can go 2 games clear of them. So I think this game really does sort of this is a really important game in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully the players treat it accordingly and they don't come in here taking him lightly, because like you said, anyone on their day, maybe bar Carlton, can beat anyone else. So if the boys don't come switched on, they're in for a world of hurt. But I'm pretty sure that they sort of know what's at stake, and I'm sure they'll be pretty dirty about the loss to the Giants and they'll bounce back.
Yep.
Well, thank you again, Grok, for coming on, and to TheLoungeLizard, you did have to duck off a little bit earlier. Sorry about all the technology issues I had with the headset cutting out halfway through. Hopefully I can edit it seamlessly, although I highly doubt it, but we'll see how it goes. But thanks again for coming on, mate. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. Great. It's always great fun, so thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Richmond BigFooty Tigercast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and YouTube so you can follow all the roast and toast, the reviews and previews, and all topics Richmond. Also keep an ear out for our special episodes of interviews with past players. Go Tigers.